She was handed one of the most magnificent jewellery collections in all of Europe. Rubies that had once belonged to Marie Antoinette, diamond parures commissioned by an emperor who adored her, tiaras worthy of the grandest courts on the continent. She wore almost none of it. Instead, this woman, an empress, a queen, one of the most powerful women of the 19th century, spent decades quietly, deliberately, and rather brilliantly dismantling every expectation placed upon her. She redesigned what an empress was supposed to look like. She turned her own hair into a crown. She wore her political convictions as jewellery. And then, after one single devastating morning in January of 1889, she put away the diamonds entirely and never really came back. Her name was Elisabeth of Austria. History knows her as Sisi, and I find her story absolutely unlike anything else in the royal world. Because this is not a story about a woman who collected jewels. This is a story about a woman who used them as a language. Every piece she chose, and every piece she refused, was a sentence in a conversation she was having with a court that wanted to silence her. So today, we are going to read that conversation. From the rubies of a doomed French queen, to the diamond stars scattered through legendary hair, to a small, dark set of onyx and jet that tells you everything about how a life can change in a single moment. Stay with us, because the jewels Sisi chose instead of her crown are far more extraordinary than the crown itself. The cage opens. On the 24th of April, 1854, 16-year-old Elizabeth married Emperor Franz Joseph in Vienna. She arrived with 25 trunks, gowns, headdresses, shoes, some jewellery, a trousseau that would have seemed extraordinary to almost anyone else. But Austrian observers judged it inadequate for an empress. Many of her most impressive jewels, they noted, had to be provided by her husband and his mother. That detail is worth sitting with for a moment. She arrived as a bride and was immediately told that what she had brought was not enough. That she, as she was not enough. The Habsburg court had rules for everything, detailed, meticulous, suffocating rules. What fabrics an empress could wear, what colours were appropriate for which occasions, how much ornament was suitable and when and why. Senior ladies-in-waiting could, and did, object if Sisi's gowns or accessories were judged too Hungarian or insufficiently in line with imperial style. And presiding over all of it was her formidable mother-in-law, Archduchess Sophie, who took control not only of court protocol, but of Sisi's first children. Imagine that. A young mother in a foreign court told that even her children did not fully belong to her. The jewels that filled her jewellery box in those early years were spectacular. Emperor Franz Joseph commissioned a grand ruby and diamond parure, tiara, necklace, earrings, as a bridal gift. The rubies themselves had a remarkable history. They had originally belonged to Queen Marie Antoinette of France, smuggled out before her execution, later acquired by the Habsburg treasury. The court jeweller Biedermann transformed them into a garland of ruby and diamond roses, heavy with historical symbolism, linking Bourbon France to the Austrian monarchy. It was everything the Habsburg court loved: formal, symmetrical, weighted with dynastic meaning, and portraits of Sisi wearing the full ruby parure are rare. Even jewellery historians acknowledge that while the set was lavish, it does not appear to have been among her favourites, especially as she grew older and more resistant to ostentatious display. There was also a diamond star tiara given by Franz Joseph for their marriage. And here is where the story takes its first extraordinary turn. At an early court event, an elder relative's lace snagged on it, and the tiara crashed to the floor. Those around her remembered it afterward as a bad omen for the marriage. But Sisi, characteristically, took that fallen star and made it into something entirely her own. A constellation she built herself. Let me tell you about Sisi's hair, because you cannot understand her jewels without it. Her hair reached nearly to her ankles when undone. It required 2 to 3 hours of daily care, washing, braiding, arranging, and during those hours, while her hairdresser worked, Sisi used the time to study languages, Greek, Hungarian. She read poetry. In a life where almost every hour was scheduled and surveilled, those hours at the dressing table were hers. And in the mid-1850s, she began commissioning something that would become the most iconic jewellery ever produced in Austria. Star-shaped hair ornaments, diamond and pearl, each with 8 or 10 points, designed to be scattered through her elaborate braided coils like a private constellation. The Vienna court jeweller A.E. Kochert created at least 27 of them for her. Another Vienna firm, Rosé and Fischmeister, produced additional sets. They could be worn not only in the hair, but as brooches, pendants, or mounted on a tiara frame, endlessly adaptable, endlessly personal. According to Kochert's own account, the inspiration may have come from a performance of Mozart's The Magic Flute at the Imperial Opera, where the Queen of the Night appeared in a costume sprinkled with stars. The usually careful emperor authorized a substantial commission for star jewels of various sizes, presenting them to Sisi for their first wedding anniversary. Now think about what she did with them. In 1865, the artist Franz Xaver Winterhalter painted what became the definitive image of Sisi. She is turned slightly to one side, in a white tulle ball gown embroidered with star motifs, her immense brown hair braided and coiled, and scattered through it those diamond stars sparkling like a private sky. No heavy crown, no towering tiara proclaiming dynastic power. Instead, her own hair, worn as a kind of living diadem with stars she had chosen and commissioned herself. The portrait was commissioned by Franz Joseph to restore her public image after years of ill health and withdrawal from Vienna. It succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. It made her a style icon across Europe. Diamond star hair ornaments were copied throughout the continent, and copies are still sold in Vienna today. But here is what mattered most about those stars, beyond their beauty. They were personal property, not state regalia, not Habsburg crown jewels. They belonged to her, which meant she could give them away, alter them, or leave them to whomever she chose. And she did exactly that. Over the years, she gifted stars to her ladies-in-waiting, to friends, to family members. A set of 27 stars was later given as a wedding present to her granddaughter Elisabeth Marie in 1900. Today, only a handful of her original stars can be confidently traced. Most have vanished into private collections or were likely broken up entirely. The fact that copies of her stars are still being made from Kochert's original designs, that museum shops in Vienna still sell star jewellery inspired by her, tells you everything about how completely this motif became associated with Sisi herself. Not with the Habsburg dynasty, not with imperial power. With her, a woman who took a fallen tiara and turned it into a constellation she wore on her own terms. Politics written in silken diamonds. If Vienna was Sisi's cage, Hungary became her refuge. From the late 1850s onward, she developed a deep and genuine attachment to Hungary, learning the language, reading its poetry, forming close friendships with Hungarian aristocrats. This was not a casual interest. It was a conviction, and it was politically significant at a time when relations between the Habsburgs and their Hungarian subjects were still raw after the failed revolution of 1848. When Sisi travelled to Hungary, she did something that made conservative Viennese courtiers quietly furious. She appeared in Hungarian-inspired dress and jewellery, a white silk dress with a black bodice trimmed with diamond and pearl-laced braid, reminiscent of hussar uniforms, a white lace apron, a Hungarian-style bonnet, jewels with local stylistic details. Modern historians have a name for what she was doing: patriotic fashionism. By layering Hungarian embroidery, braids and jewellery details onto fashionable silhouettes, she turned her own appearance into a walking argument for reconciliation between the monarchy and Hungary's political class. She was not simply dressing up. She was making a statement that the court could see but could not easily punish because it was expressed through fabric and gemstones rather than words. This sartorial politics reached its culmination in the Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867, which created the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. Sisi had worked behind the scenes with Count Gyula Andrassy, pressing her husband to accept terms favourable to Hungarian autonomy. And on the 8th of June, 1867, in Matthias Church in Buda, Franz Joseph and Elizabeth were crowned King and Queen of Hungary. At that coronation, Sisi wore elaborate Hungarian regalia, a richly embroidered gown inspired by national costume, jewels echoing local motifs, a coronation crown complementing the ancient Holy Crown of St. Stephen. The Hungarian coronation regalia are among the oldest in Europe, and their temporary union with Sisi's person that day visually bound her to Hungary's thousand-year-old kingship tradition. She continued to wear Hungarian-style dress and jewellery during visits to Hungary, even when Viennese courtiers felt it was inappropriate. She did not stop. She did not apologise. In Vienna, she wore the diamonds and rubies they gave her when she had to. In Budapest, she wore the jewels she had chosen herself, laden with meanings of loyalty and political hope. The contrast could not have been more deliberate. Beauty as armour. By the late 1860s and 1870s, something shifted in Sisi. The rebellion that had once expressed itself outwardly through Hungarian dress, through star jewels, through refusing to wear the ruby parure, turned inward. She became obsessively devoted to preserving her beauty and her physical form. Her waist measured around 50 centimetres, approximately 20 inches, maintained by tight corsets and a punishing regime of exercise, walking and riding. She could walk or ride for hours without apparent fatigue, feats that genuinely shocked contemporaries accustomed to more sedentary royal women. Her care of her hair became almost ritualistic, weekly or tri-weekly washings that could consume an entire day using raw eggs and cognac, multi-hour braiding sessions, and after her early 30s, she refused to sit for new official portraits or photographs, trying, in effect, to freeze her public image as the youthful beauty of Winterhalter's painting. In this context, heavy, formal jewellery increasingly lost its appeal. The drama of her hair, the line of her silhouette, the contrast between very simple or very symbolic jewels, these became her aesthetic. Accounts from the Sisi Museum and modern biographies emphasize that her later public appearances relied more on striking gowns and veils than on cascades of diamonds. And increasingly, she treated jewellery not as something to accumulate, but as something to give away. The jeweller Kuschert noted that she distributed many pieces generously to her ladies-in-waiting, friends and relatives. A gold snake bracelet with emerald and diamonds, documented as a personal gift from Elizabeth, later surfaced at auction. A diamond cipher brooch featuring the letter E beneath an imperial crown. Delicate, compact, more about personal meaning than overwhelming scale, was documented as an imperial presentation jewel given by her directly. These pieces show us a woman using jewellery as a language of personal relationships and imperial favour, even as she herself retreated further and further from the bejewelled public stage. She was giving away the glitter, keeping only what meant something. When diamonds turned to jet. On the 30th of January 1889, Sisi's only son, Crown Prince Rudolf, was found dead at his hunting lodge at Mayerling alongside his young mistress. It appears to have been a murder-suicide pact. The scandal shook the Austro-Hungarian Empire to its foundations, and it broke Elizabeth. From that day forward, she dressed almost exclusively in black velvet, black crepe, black jet. She withdrew from public life, avoided mirrors, and refused to confront her aging face and grief-stricken eyes. The woman who had once scattered diamond stars through her legendary hair now wore a six-piece mourning set in onyx and jet, brooches, pendants, earrings, against her black gowns. The Sisi Museum in Vienna's Hofburg displays that mourning set today. It is a centerpiece of the collection, deliberately placed to convey the depth and permanence of her grief. Jet and onyx were quintessential Victorian mourning materials, their deep, matte black avoiding the sparkling reflections considered inappropriate for the bereaved. But in Sisi's case, this was not a temporary mourning period. Multiple sources note that after Mayerling, she hardly wore any of her jewellery in the traditional sense. The shift from diamonds and rubies to jet and onyx was absolute, and it was permanent. She also began wearing a black velvet face mask trimmed with lace and ostrich feathers, with an asymmetrical veil extending down to her hips. Designed by her dressmaker in 1889, it fully obscured much of her face. Rare photographs show her hiding behind a fan or positioning herself to thwart the camera entirely. She had spent decades fighting to control her own image. Now she simply erased it. After 1889, she seldom stayed long in Vienna. She travelled almost constantly to health resorts, to the Mediterranean, to her beloved Achillean palace on Corfu, often under the pseudonym Countess of Hohenems. Her clothing and jewellery during these years remained nearly uniformly black. Black glass or jet beads, black veils, black fans, even in southern climates where lighter colours would have been more practical. The woman who had once been Europe's most celebrated beauty had chosen invisibility. The final silence. On the 10th of September, 1898, while walking along the promenade in Geneva, Sisi, travelling incognito under her countess's title, was stabbed in the chest with a sharpened file by an Italian anarchist named Luigi Lucchini. At first, those around her did not realise she had been mortally wounded. She walked back to her hotel before collapsing. Only after her corset was cut open did the nature of the injury become clear. She died shortly afterward, aged 60, bringing to an end a 44-year tenure as Empress and Queen. The scene in Geneva is notably, almost painfully, devoid of jewellery. No great crowns, no state tiaras. Only a thin, veiled woman in black, effectively anonymous until her identity was discovered. She had spent her life refusing to be defined by the jewels they gave her. In the end, she had succeeded so completely that no one even recognized her. What remains of Sisi's jewel world today is fragmentary, and that fragmentation is itself part of the story. The Habsburg Ruby Parure, those rubies that had once belonged to Marie Antoinette, remade into a bridal gift for a girl who never truly wanted them, was stolen by a trusted advisor to the last emperor after the collapse of the monarchy. It has never been recovered, one of the great lost royal jewel mysteries. The diamond stars she loved so fiercely. Only 3 of her original stars can be confidently traced today. The rest have vanished, scattered like she always wanted to be, into the wider world. And yet her image endures. The Winterhalter portrait, with those stars glittering in her hair, still hangs in Vienna. Museum shops still sell star jewellery inspired by her. Visitors to the Hofburg still stand before her mourning set in onyx and jet and feel the weight of what those dark stones replaced. Here is what I keep returning to. Sisi's jewellery box tells the story of a woman navigating power, expectation, and grief. Not through speeches or declarations, but through what she chose to put on her body and what she chose to take off. The rubies they gave her, a dazzling chain she never fully accepted. The diamond stars, a constellation she wore entirely on her own terms. The Hungarian jewels, a political manifesto stitched in silk and gemstones. The onyx and jet, a darkness she never came back from. She was an empress who refused to wear her crown. And in doing so, she told us more about herself than any crown ever could. I want to know what you think. Of all the jewels in Sisi's story, the stars, the rubies, the mourning set, which one speaks to you most? Which piece do you think captures who she really was? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. And if this kind of story, the hidden histories, the jewels that carry lifetimes of meaning, is what you come here for, then please give this video a like. It truly helps more people find these stories. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join us. There are so many more extraordinary women and their extraordinary jewels still waiting to be discovered. I'll see you in the next one.